Trump not understanding Iranian culture and history and getting us into a global conflict is the same mistake business leaders make, which makes sense since he's trained as a businessman that hasn't done a very good job and has gone bankrupt 6 times. A manual that has literally been handed out to business leaders for about 30 years has been the 48 Laws of Power, and one of those laws of power encourages leaders to completely get rid of anything the guy before you had. Chuck it, demolish it so that you can make your own mark and get your own power. Now, how I critique this book is it never tells you the impact that has, because then you are extremely vulnerable to making mistakes that could have been prevented. One of the first things I ask people who come to me for coaching is, what have you already tried to solve this situation? Because why the fuck would they pay me to tell them something they've already done? And I want to know, based on the context they're in, what is not working. It helps me get a sense of the environment because there's not a universal truth. Train business leaders on this, and that's why in the chapter of my book, The Unwritten Rules of Work, on the unwritten rule of compliance, which is that you can't speak up even if they seem to be asking you to speak up. I started the book with an example, a case study from the 1980s, and I end with a case study from 2017 where they used the same issue. Actually, no, that was the chapter on the unwritten rule of indirect communication. My bad. No, there are still patterns in the compliance, but they had the same problems that we have not addressed in decades, where if we took a second to learn from our past mistakes, we would do better in business. We wouldn't have the world being destroyed by a handful of people with insane amounts of power. I guess in some ways it gets you power, but which is the point of the 48 Laws of Power. But also keep in mind that it is for only a handful, that it's not most of us, and that a lot of these people, like the president, were born into a certain amount of cushion that the working class does not have. Now, the working class is not good at knowing history and context either. The chunk of that, of course, is lack of access to affordable education. But there is also the context of when you live in right now, when you are trying to survive right now, you are only thinking of what is going on in that second, how you can survive. You're not thinking the long-term culture and history and the context. And that gets first-generation professionals into trouble. You have to learn how to look at that in that environment and to not make quick second decisions. Considering this is how Trump and his era of leaders and everyone who's come after have been trained, it's no surprise that he came into office and killed the Iranian deal. Because Obama made it, therefore he had to get rid of it, because that's how he's been trained to think. I mean, yes, he's also pretty clearly a bona fide narcissist, but even for people who aren't, this is what has been groomed. This is what they have been taught leadership is, and it doesn't go well. I believe it's the Washington Post article on Trump and Iran that said Trump has turned Iran from a very pro-American society to a very anti-American society in just a few years. By getting rid of that deal and starting this shit. The same is done in business, where you might think you're coming in to show, look guys, I figured it out. When you make the same mistakes as your predecessor, you don't look powerful. You look like an idiot. Like something could have been prevented, especially when you're causing problems that have already been solved. That's another thing a lot of toxic leaders do. Call it the Munchausen by proxy syndrome, but for leaders, is make a problem and then be the one to fix it. We got to keep an eye out for this, folks, because people only have power and leadership positions when they have followers. As I say all the time, I could probably put it on a t-shirt by now. If we don't follow them, they're just losers screaming in the comments on YouTube. If this interests you and you don't want to embarrass yourself this way, check out my book, The Unwritten Rules of Work, and there's a link in my bio if you want to book a 20-minute consult with me to see if I can help you.